Tired of the conflicting advice in the world of health and wellness? Ready for clear, science-backed strategies to live a longer, healthier life? Welcome to the Duration Wellness Show. We focus on health and wellness education to help you become a better, more informed you. Wherever you are on your journey, we're here with you for the duration. Welcome to the Duration Wellness Show. So excited to have you and so excited for this episode, Strength Training, the Hype versus Evidence.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, can't wait. So in this episode, we are cutting through the hype, debunking some of the crazier exercise myths, and focusing on what really moves the needle when it comes to getting stronger, staying durable, and training in a way that supports longevity. Our guest today is Dr. Lauren Shelton, a doctor of physical therapy and the creator of LOA Movement, a fitness platform centered on longevity and the idea that movement should help us live better for longer. Her work sits at the intersection of performance and long-term wellness. Her focus is on helping people build strength, mobility, and durability with expertly guided workouts. So welcome. So excited to have you here. I don't know if you want to share a little bit more about your background and the LOA movement.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Anna-Marie. So my dad actually opened a gym when I was very, very little and just a couple of years old. And so I grew up in a gym setting. Like I would literally clean equipment for like $5 an hour to make extra cash. And so I watched my parents strength train consistently my entire life. They still do now. So I was always very interested in strength training, and it just felt like part of a regular routine for me. And so when I went to college, I studied exercise science at Carolina, and I started working as a personal trainer soon after. And I loved that. However, I felt like in personal training, there was a lot of emphasis on aesthetics. And I felt like why someone hired me as a personal trainer was based on like your body and how you looked and what their aesthetic goals were. And while aesthetic goals aren't all bad, it just wasn't really what I was interested. I didn't really necessarily want to work with people solely to help them change the way their body looked. And so soon after working as a personal trainer for a year or two, I ended up going to physical therapy school. I went to Duke and got my doctorate in physical therapy and began treating patients. So that was fun because it took my concepts of strength and conditioning into a rehab setting. And obviously very different than an aesthetics-based setting.
Yeah, very different, yeah.
Yeah, and went from like, okay, wow, it was all aesthetics. Now we're trying to get someone back to just regular function. Maybe they had a rotator cuff surgery, or, maybe they're having low back pain. Not always post-op. It might be just coming in with some sort of pain. And so helping them, how can we help them return to function without pain? So very, very different shift. And then I ended up going to do a residency program at Mayo Clinic, Florida, and did orthopedic residency in physical therapy to just kind of further my clinical practice skills, treated patients for a couple years, and then now shifted into what I do, which is virtual fitness. So I have a virtual fitness platform, LOA Movement, and my goal with LOA Movement is to make strength training feel really accessible for everyone. I love using my background in physical therapy to educate throughout my classes because the reality is the average person working out is going to experience some level of pain. So helping people to navigate and be able to show up consistently. So that's what I do now. I absolutely love it. And yeah, it's been a really fun 3 full years of doing that full time now.
Yeah. No, and I love it. I mean, I use your workout app and they're all amazing.
Oh, you're sweet.
Yeah, no, but it's true. And I think longevity is such a buzzword now, but I feel like you have kind of been there before it even became kind of popular. But the focus on actually like keeping it safe and strengthening it in a way that people can, that's for their future, right? So it's like not just training for like one. I think people used to think about getting stronger for, maybe like a race or, like some short-term goal, but not like their overall life, fitness. And I think that you've kind of, especially with your app, you're very good about how important it is to strength train in like a sustainable way so that in 20, 30, 40 years, you can like still be stronger, right? And how important it is. So
absolutely.
And I think that kind of brings us into our first question of what is important when it comes to strength training.
So what really moves the needle, and I know this sounds cliche, and is genuinely consistency. We live in this age of information overload. And I actually hear from people all the time that say, they listen to podcasts, or they saw stuff from Instagram, and now they're worried that, oh my gosh, if I don't eat my breakfast before my workout, is it spiking my cortisol? If I don't reach all the way to muscle failure, is it even really doing anything for me? And, we laugh at this stuff, but I have talked to so many people that they hear all those things. And what happens is they end up saying, you know what? Well, I don't know if I'm doing anything right, so I'm just not going to do anything at all.
Yeah.
I seriously have that conversation with so many people on a regular basis. They're like, well, my stomach kind of hurts to eat breakfast and then work out, but then I'm worried to work out on empty stomach because I saw all the stuff online about how bad it is. So I guess I just like won't even work out.
Yep.
And it really does sound silly, but it's so true. And if you think like, okay, well, if I'm not strength training to the point of like complete muscle failure, I'm not actually getting stronger, so why do anything? What we see time and time again in the literature is really everything works. Anything that you can do consistently in terms of strength training will work. And of course, we'll get into some nuance in this podcast tonight, but the reality is strength training consistently, and I like to say my non-negotiable movement minimum is 2 workouts a week. So on a regular week, I think it's great to shoot for maybe 3 to 4 strength training sessions for the average person.
Yeah.
But I find that that number can feel really hard if, you have kids, a full-time job, all these things like everybody does, right?
Yeah.
It starts to feel like, oh my gosh, how do I fit this in? And then it's another conversation of like, well, if I can't even get in 3 workouts, then why do it at all? I'll just throw in the towel. So something that's really worked for me and my clients is saying your non-negotiable movement minimum every week is just 2 workouts.
Yeah.
So if it's a busy week, I just want you to get in 2 strength training sessions. Don't go less than that minimum. And that can look like 1 weekend workout and just 1 weekday workout. Like if,
Mhm.
you're working long hours, I know you have long shifts. Like if there are going to be weeks where that's all you can do is 1 weekday workout and maybe 1 weekend, that is so much better than trying to work out 4 days 1 week and then nothing the next week.
Yeah.
Like on the weeks that you have time, get in 3 to 4 workouts, but never try to make it so you don't drop below that non-negotiable movement minimum of 2 workouts. And that truly is huge to move the needle. The other thing is making sure that you're doing something you enjoy. As silly as it sounds, we actually have research to show people are going to be more consistent doing something that they love.
Yeah.
So if you are, someone that truly loves CrossFit and loves the community aspect, like I wouldn't be trying to convince that person to quit CrossFit and come take my classes. I want them to do something that they love and that they can do week in and week out for years and years.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that makes sense. And also just in terms of people, the consistency, like if you make it doable, right, you're going to be way more likely to stay with it for the long haul. Like you said, it's like if somebody thinks like, oh, I have to do 4, 5, 6 every week. And that's, if I miss one, then I have like lost everything I've done before. They're more likely to be like, well, I had a bad week. Now I'm just going to skip next week. And then the week after that and the week after that,
And then they
versus,
stop.
yep.
Yeah.
And versus, if you have something that's actually doable, like 2, or
Yes.
on good weeks, you can do more, but like at least something like that, it's like I feel like it makes it a lot more sustainable for people.
And a great conversation shift that I like to kind of remind people is if you're going to work out 4 days a week for 6 weeks, but then you're burnt out because you're so exhausted, that is less effective than working out 2 days a week for the entire year. So, and we even have literature showing that even 2 workouts a week can be effective at building strength and muscle mass. So there's actually studies showing that even that those 2 workouts are absolutely moving the needle.
Yeah.
So sure, shoot for more, but if that's like bogging you down, hit 2 a week.
Yeah. Okay. I love that. And then again, something you enjoy, which I think is so important because I think there's also a lot on Instagram. It'll be like, don't do this workout. This, you're going to get hurt doing this, and this is actually not helping you, and you need to do this workout. And it's like, okay, well, what do you actually love? What are you going to consistently do? What are you going to, that's so important. So how would you explain strength versus like hypertrophy?
Yeah. So hypertrophy is building muscle mass, so muscle size, and strength is improving your muscle force output. But we got to talk about that deeper. Let's kind of define how you would train for the 2. You can't fully parse out just training for hypertrophy or just training for strength. And by that, I mean, when you lift weights, naturally, you're going to improve both of those things. You are going to increase muscle mass and you're going to increase strength. But you can alter your training to kind of prioritize one versus the other. The ACSM, the American College of Sports Medicine, actually just released, I think last week, new strength training guidelines, and I was reading over them, which is really exciting because they hadn't been updated, I want to say, since like 2009. So it'd been a long time coming of like needing some, because, so much strength training education coming out, literature on strength and conditioning. And so it's exciting to see those guidelines updated. And
Yeah.
what they really saw is when it comes to strength, that 2 workouts a week is great. And also just 2 to 3 sets working closer to your 1 rep max. So 1 rep max is what's the max amount of weight that you can lift one time. So let's say I like to use the example of a chest press or a bench press. So chest press just being like a dumbbell chest movement, or bench press, oftentimes people are using a barbell. But just working the chest, people can usually really visually imagine that movement.
Yeah.
If you could load up 100 pounds and you could only move the bar one time, that's your 1 rep max. So we see that for strength, working closer to that 1 rep max with lower repetitions per set is more optimized for strength. There's a lot of nuance here, and I'll get into it in a moment. But so let's say you are doing a workout and you come in, you're like, gosh, my goal is really to improve my strength, to improve that 1 rep max. Then you're probably going to want to do working sets of like 3 to maybe 5 or 6 repetitions, because you're working close to your 1 rep max with the goal of trying to improve your 1 rep max. So that's strength. You don't need a ton of sets per week. Like honestly, 2 to 3 sets per session. So maybe the full week is just looking like 4 to 5 sets per muscle group. Now, hypertrophy, on the other hand, building muscle size, we actually see that the more volume you do per week is more effective at growing muscle size. So more like 10 sets per muscle group per week. There's quite a few things to kind of parse out here, though. If you're working your chest and you are doing chest press, chest flies, bunch of different exercise for your chest, all those sets will count towards chest. But you're also working your triceps in those movements. So muscles don't purely work in isolation.
Right.
Even if you're doing a very isolated movement, you can't ever just only work your triceps, right? Other muscles are going to be stabilizing. So if you're doing a chest press, sure, the target muscle is your chest, but you're still going to be getting some tricep. You're going to get some of anterior deltoid to the front of your shoulder. So those can kind of count as what's called fractional sets, meaning if you're doing a chest exercise, you can count it as 1 set for chest and like a half set for triceps. Now, I don't want people to get bogged down in all these numbers, because it's not really about the numbers. What it is about is the fact that you don't have to look at it so carefully like, oh, well, I have to make sure I hit every single week, 6 sets of triceps, biceps, shoulders, chest, glutes, quads. It's not like that. Because, if you're doing a squat, you're going to be hitting most all your leg muscles, right?
Yeah.
Same with if you're doing any kind of compound movement. I love mixing compound and more isolated movements for this reason, because compound, you're going to hit a lot of muscles, but isolated is oftentimes really more comfortable. So for someone who's experiencing a lot of pain, maybe is having a hard time going heavier, can really allow you to use less weight, isolate a muscle, and hit fatigue. So I want to go back to the strength portion here, though, because I got a lot to say about this, because we talked about that 1 rep max.
Yeah.
But I think this really confuses people, because they think that, okay, so this means that the only way I'm building strength is if I go load up a barbell and do, sets of like 3 reps at my 1 rep max. That's really not true. And this is because you have to understand how research measures strength versus just strength in real life. So as I said before, research measures strength with that 1 rep max testing. It's measurable. We're trying to see, okay, what can you hit max weight for 1 repetition?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that other lifts aren't building strength. So I like to describe it as studying for a test. So for example, I really like math, and that was a subject I was always pretty good at in school. But the very first time I took the SAT, I didn't actually score that great on the math section. But it wasn't because I was bad at math. It was because I would just needed to study more for the test. So then I went through and did all those SAT workbooks, whatever, retook the math portion, and I did significantly better. It's not that I necessarily got way smarter at math, right? I just studied more for the test.
Yeah.
1 rep max testing is just like that. You can do sets of 10, sets of 15, and challenge yourself. You're still getting stronger. Absolutely. It just might not show up as much in that 1 rep max testing as when you're training for the test and really working close to your 1 rep max with your working sets. So you might be like, well, then how do I know? How do I know if I'm getting stronger? Well, let's say you were doing a chest press exercise, 3 sets of 10, and you're holding 20-pound dumbbells. Then in 6 months to a year from now, you're able to do 3 sets of 10, holding 30-pound dumbbells. It's quite obvious that you got stronger, right?
Yeah.
And that's why I like to take it back to just like, there's so much nuance, but for the average person, it really doesn't matter because if you show up consistently, you're moving dumbbells around, and as things get easier, you say, hey, I'm going to add a little bit weight. It's progressive overload, right? Just you're consistently strength training, and you start to notice, wow, the weights that were challenging for me 6 months ago aren't really that hard right now. I'll add a little bit of weight. That's getting stronger. And so, unless you're like a power lifter or somebody that's competing and you really care about your 1 rep max numbers, it doesn't really matter. If you're challenging yourself with the dumbbells that you're using or whatever resistance that you're using, you're going to get stronger. So, you don't have to stress too much about the nitty gritty there.
Yeah, which I love because, I do think that's most people's goal, right? Is that they actually want to be able to live their life and they want to, have something that's sustainable, but also like be able to run around with their kids, right? And then be able to lift up their kids, right? Like, I
Yeah.
just think of like, I can see myself getting stronger just in the fact that my toddler's 33 pounds and then my baby's like another 20. So if I'm carrying both of them, it's like 55. And like
Yes.
when I started out, that would have been like really tough. And now it's like, wait, I can do that.
Yeah. Them growing in size is like your
Yeah.
progressive overload.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, but anyway, it's very helpful though to have that, I feel like, understanding of how they test that strength. Because I do think a lot of people will focus on that. We're like, no, you have to lift this super heavy, and that's the only way that you're going to get there. But it's like, well, no, you can actually still get stronger,
Yes. And
working out
to
these other
me,
ways.
I have found it to be very, very empowering for people, myself included. I have struggled with knee injuries. And when I used to read that literature and I didn't quite understand, like, you know, the test versus real life and what we're looking at, I thought, like, if I wasn't barbell back squatting, max weight that I could for like sets of 3 to 4 to 5 reps, that what's the point? Because I'm not increasing my strength. And it was killing my low back. It was
Yep.
killing my knees. And for me personally, it didn't feel good with all the, mobility and form work that I know and cues and all the things just was really hard on my body. And so what I found is that using slightly lighter weights, more moderate rep ranges. So moderate intensity, meaning just I'm working more at like 60 to 70% of my 1 rep max. And I'm now challenging myself with sets of like 10 to 15 repetitions. Still, by the time I get to rep number 10, number 11, number 12, it's feeling very, very hard. I am challenging myself. I am getting stronger, but I don't have joint pain like I did when I was trying to lift so, so heavy. And that's not to fearmonger and tell people that lifting heavy is bad. It's absolutely not. It's not bad. It's fantastic. But different people's bodies can tolerate different things. And
Yeah.
when I used to just force myself to train that way, I couldn't be consistent because
Mhm.
I felt like garbage all the time. And like I said at the very beginning, nothing is going to trump consistency. Like at the end of the day, when I'm working with someone and I'm trying to get them to overcome obstacles, it is solely so that they'll show up consistently.
Yeah.
So if someone's like, gosh, I was doing all these barbell lifts, super heavy, but I was always just, struggling with debilitating back pain. I'm like, hey, you can get stronger in a million different ways. Like that's what the ACSM new guidelines are showing us is like, okay, pretty much everything works. Like
Yeah.
literally everything.
Yeah.
Resistance training across the board. When I say everything, I mean all forms of resistance training
Right.
are effective to some degree. Now, sure, you can split hairs and try to optimize things, but let's be real, for the average person, that's not really the thing that's going to move the needle. It doesn't, I don't really care what my 1 rep max bench or back squat is.
Right.
I'm a mom, I've got 2 kids, I'm a business owner. That number means nothing to me
Yeah.
personally. But I do know that I need to be strong because I want to have muscle mass to support as I age. I want to have strong bones. And so lifting in that like 10 to 15 rep range, so slightly lighter weights, more like 60 to 70% of my 1 rep max, has been way more effective for me personally to show up consistently.
Yeah. Well, and I think that that's a lot of people. And I mean, something I feel like I hear on Instagram all the time is, again, for, bone density, for strength, everything you have to lift super, super heavy. And if you're not lifting super, super heavy, you're going to miss out on, all of the
Yeah.
opportunities. So I think that kind of we just touched on it a little bit, but like, can you build muscle with light weights? It seems like
Yeah.
yes. So, I mean, I think that's so encouraging for so many people. So, what do you think about, light
Yeah.
weights and what do you need to do if you're using light weights? And
Yeah. Great question. So when you talk about lightweights, it's very important to understand that that's a relative term. This is another thing that I think is lost in translation through, the information overload era that we're in.
yeah,
Is people when you say lightweights, they think like a tiny 2-pound dumbbell that's like hot pink, right? And then when you think of
yeah,
heavyweights, you think of a giant, massive barbell with 300 pounds on it. And it's like that, those terms don't really mean anything because let's say you had a 20-pound dumbbell and you said, yeah, like this is the weight that I use for squats. That's relatively kind of light. But if you told me I use this 20-pound dumbbell for bicep curls, I'd be like, dang, that's pretty good. So,
yeah,
so there's an example of just like the actual number on the dumbbell is completely relative to what movement you're even talking about. What muscle group are you hitting? Are you
yeah,
talking like your bicep? Are you talking like your glutes?
yeah.
The second piece here is biomechanics. So if you, let's say, you do chest press with 30-pound dumbbells. So, for those of you who are not familiar, a chest press is the elbow bent and you're pressing the dumbbell. You could do it bilaterally with barbells or dumbbells and you're pressing. You might be holding 30-pound dumbbells. That's what I use right now. So, I'll just say that 30-pound dumbbells. Well, that's a pec exercise, but then I could swap that out and hold 15-pound dumbbells, so half the amount of weight, and do a chest fly. So your arm is much straighter. You've got a
Mhm.
longer lever arm. So
Yeah,
the dumbbell is further from the working joint. Now you're holding half the weight, but you're probably going to feel like the exercises feel pretty comparable in terms of effort.
yeah,
So I can do about, let's say, like 15 repetitions holding 30 pounds for my chest press, probably only about 15 repetitions holding 15 pounds for a chest fly. So using a lighter weight with a biomechanically more challenging movement is going to be about the same. Your muscles don't know numbers, they know effort, they know fatigue. So it's not really about the number on the dumbbell. If you don't know not you personally, but if someone listening is like, what the heck is the difference between a chest press and chest fly? I lost her. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Just think about when you're holding groceries. If you're holding, 10 bags of groceries, you're going to hold them down by your side. Now imagine that you straightened your arms and held them out in front of you. That's way harder, but it's the same amount of weight, right?
yeah,
The groceries didn't change in weight, but you made the exercises way harder by holding it away from your body. And so that's where I call it physics on the body. Lifting weights is like physics on the body. This is where biomechanics comes into play. And so I like to help people, especially people with hypermobility or joint pain, and show them that like you don't have to go in the gym and pick up 300-pound barbells if you don't want to. There are absolutely ways that we can biomechanically challenge your muscles, help you approach muscle fatigue with lighter weights that maybe feel safer for you, maybe feel just more approachable to you, or maybe honestly, that just might be what you have at your home and you can't
yeah.
leave for the gym on a consistent basis and it's all about
Mhm.
consistency.
Yep.
So that's where it comes down to absolutely lighter weights can build muscle. I should also talk about, so that's the biomechanical standpoint about how light weights are relative. But we also see in the literature that when it comes to muscle mass, we used to think there was like this old school thought process. And actually, when I was in college, this is making me sound a little bit old, but when I was in college, we were taught that you would train for strength for sets of like 0 to 5 repetitions.
Mhm.
Then you would train for hypertrophy for sets of like 5 to 12 repetitions. And then like above 12 reps was muscle endurance. That was kind of the breakdown of how you would train based on your goal. But what we know in the literature now is that's not true. And what we see actually hypertrophy can happen. So building muscle mass can happen at any single rep range. You could do, sets of 3 repetitions, sets of 10 repetitions, sets of 20 repetitions. Even studies showing as many as 30 repetitions can build muscle mass, provided that the last few repetitions feel challenging. So let me explain that another way for you. Let's go back to our chest press example. If you were holding, for me, if I'm holding 30 pounds, I can hit about 15 reps. That will build muscle. Yay. If maybe I want to hold 15 pounds, and then maybe now I can do about 25 repetitions. That will still build muscle. So there comes a point where if I held like a 5 pound dumbbell, for me personally, at this point in my strength training journey, I could probably do 100 repetitions. That's too light to build muscle. But the
Okay.
range is pretty wide.
Yeah.
So like I tell people like keep your sets, make if you're trying to under 25 reps or less. So if you pick up a dumbbell, no matter what weight it is, and you get to the point where the reps start feeling really challenging and you're starting to get to what's called muscle fatigue and you're under 25 repetitions, you're good to go. Does that make sense?
No, yeah, it does. Yeah. No, and I mean, I think that's an interesting so, just so that I understand a little bit better,
Yeah.
if you're I mean, would you say then, like, even if you're using a lighter weight, if you know, you can adjust it, sometimes the movements, right, in
Yep.
terms of what we were talking about before, to make the end challenging, but, like, if you also just, like or I guess you would just get tired if it's a heavy enough weight, but also you could kind of be using lighter weights and then at the end kind of change out your weights and use heavier weights at the end. But as long as if at the end you're having like that weakness, would that kind of like show that you're getting that
Okay.
or
Yes, I
not
see what you're
really?
saying. You can do that, but more simply, it's if you're doing the set and you're like, okay, I like today, I'm going to just do sets of 10 repetitions because you need those last 8, 9, 10 reps to feel challenging. That's very
Yeah.
key. You want those last few reps to feel challenging. You're probably going to have to use a heavier weight than if you're like, oh, I'm going to do sets of 20 repetitions. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I'm not talking about using different weights within the same set. It's more that you're like, okay, like if I pick up a 15-pound dumbbell, I'm probably going to have to do about 15 to 20 reps to get to that point where the reps start to feel
Yeah.
challenging.
Versus if you had like a 20 pound and then it might just you need
Exactly.
only need 10 or 12 or something. Okay.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So if you're using a lighter weight, you're just going to have to do more repetitions to get
Yeah.
to that point where it feels tiring.
Yeah.
And for that point, so we call muscle failure is the point where you literally cannot do another rep.
Mhm.
With good form though. If you are like straining, arching your back and you start feeling like neck and all these other things, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, you probably already hit failure at your chest because now your body's trying to recruit every other muscle in your
Yeah.
body to move the weight. So I like to give that caveat because a lot of people are like, well, I could go heavier. And I'm like, well, like at that point, like, are you just like, what are you doing? Are you doing like lifting through your feet now to like get
Yeah.
like you got to make sure that you're still talking about the same muscle you were trying to target.
Yeah.
So that's muscle failure. You can't do another rep. Muscle fatigue is just meaning you're getting to that point where the reps slow down and feel challenging. We see in the literature that you actually don't need to hit all the way till muscle failure to build muscle and strength. Yeah, that's like,
I feel like that's really encouraging because I
yes,
something that I have always, honestly thought is that you do need that like, okay, I'm dying, I'm dead, to actually get the muscle to build. And like that's the
yes.
point that you're aiming for.
No, that's one of the
So
specific things they pointed out in the new ACSM guidelines. And I've actually read quite a few studies showing that, hey, you can actually leave what's called reps in reserve. That's what they call it in the literature. And absolutely still make similar gains to someone that's taking all the way to failure. So it can really help someone with that consistency factor because if you're constantly trying to get to muscle failure with every set, first of all, you're going to be pretty darn sore and it's going
yeah.
to be hard to show up on a regular basis. So for me personally in my workouts, like I really try to get in a minimum of 3 to 4 workouts a week. Of course, I've got that non-negotiable minimum of 2, but on a regular week, I'm trying to get 3 to 4. I can't be taking all of those to muscle failure because
Yeah.
I've just found for me, I can't show up that consistently when I do it. I'm too sore. I like it makes my body ache. So I get to the point where the repetitions slow down and they feel challenging. And that's that point where I'm like, cool, that's it. I feel good. That's what I'm trying to hit. I'm not
Yeah.
necessarily trying to get to the point where I physically cannot lift the dumbbell. And yeah, it's pretty encouraging to see in the literature, like, hey, that's actually not quite as important as we thought. As long as the last few reps feel challenging, like adequately challenging, and you're like, wow, yeah, I can't just like boom, 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 rep it out. That the resistance is giving you a nice challenge. That's
Yeah.
good. Like you're gonna get stronger.
Yeah. I think that's awesome. No, yeah, I think I've definitely had those times where I push myself way too far. And then, yeah, you can't work out the next day because you're like, I can't walk, I can't move,
Yeah.
I can't
Or
pick up my
3
baby
days.
because I'm
Yeah.
like, yeah, so sore. So I think it's really good to kind of that the literature shows that. It's really encouraging.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yes.
So bone density, I think that is a hot topic, as it should be, because honestly,
Yeah,
bone density is so important, right? One of the biggest things I see people all the time who come in with broken hips, they just fall. And I think now we're realizing how important it is, to try to prevent, all that bone loss that you can have. And so lifting weights is part of that, right? Getting stronger.
absolutely.
But with light weights, I think everybody says you have to lift heavy for bone density. Do we find that that is actually true, or it really has to be these super heavy, heavy sets for bone density, or can it also be light weights?
So I did a really big deep dive on this because I was curious about this too. And so about a year, probably less than a year, about like 6 to 8 months ago, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to read through all the literature that's available to me. And I spent hours and hours and hours in reading on this. And what I saw is actually lighter weights can improve bone density. So I want to talk about a few things. First is that there's a very popular study called the Liftmore trial, and it's
Yeah.
from Australia. And it was a fantastically designed study. It was a wonderful study. And from that study, they concluded that lifting heavy was effective to improve bone density. So a lot of people took that study and they said, erroneously, lifting heavy is the only way to improve bone density. But
Yeah,
that's not what the study looked at.
I hear that
Yeah.
all the time. I mean, I've heard
Yes.
so many podcasts on this, and I have people send me like, "Hey, did you watch this video?" And it's
Yeah.
like, you have to lift heavy, and the lift more trial is what they talk about. So, yeah.
Absolutely. So, one of my favorite researchers, Professor Stuart Phillips, he talks about this a lot about really helping people understand that it's not all about lifting heavy. So let's talk about the Lift More trial. So what that trial compared it is, I'm sure you're all familiar with how research study design works, but I'll break it down for our listeners. So you have a group that's the exercising group, and then you have a group that's the control group that you're comparing them to. The exercising group, what they did was very heavy lifts. They did I'm pretty sure it was back squats, deadlifts, and overhead shoulder press with a barbell, working very close to their 1 rep max. So they were doing sets of about 5 repetitions, trying to work to that muscle failure point with a very close to their 1 rep max. Okay. They also in the study did what they called drop landings, where they had them like kind of hold on to a bar overhead, let go of the bar, and try to land with their legs pretty stiff to create impact. Yes, that's a lot of part about the study that
Wow.
people don't talk about.
I
Okay.
did not know that.
Yes, I have read this study many times because
Yeah.
it's always quoted to me as like, oh, you can only. I literally will have people. I create a lot of content for social media, and I have people actually comment and be like, "You have to lift heavy," and then parentheses they'll cite like cited the Liftmore trial, and I'm always like, "Have you read the Liftmore trial?" Because
Yeah.
so you have these groups that are lifting very very heavy, and then you have them doing drop landings, okay? And the idea is to they want maximal ground reaction force. They're really trying to create impact on the body because that's what their hypothesis was, is that you need impact and heavy lifting to help improve bone density. Now, when you look at the control group, the group they compared to it, they specifically say in the study that the control group was designed to have minimal effect on bone, meaning it was a true control. They were doing like the exercises were crazy. They were like body weight lunges and like calf raises and stuff and like light stretching. So they designed an exercise program that would be like, hey, we are designing a program that we think will have almost no effect on bone density. This is our control group, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So, and then what they found at the end of the study is, oh, hey, actually, the group that lifted really, really heavy and did those drop landings did improve bone density. They improved by a little bit. Now, also a reminder that even the most effective strength training program is only going to improve bone density slightly because bone takes a long time to remodel. This was like a year-long study, I believe, and your study really has to be at least a year to show changes in bone. And that's why consistency is so important
Yeah.
because we need strength training we really want people strength training 5, 10, 15, 20 years when we're talking about bone. Muscle's
Yeah.
super fun because it can adapt in like 6 to 8 weeks and you'll see it changes. But bone is going to take a long time. So we need people in it for the long haul. So
Yeah.
back to the study. You cannot conclude from that study that the only thing that works is lifting heavy because A, they also did these drop landings, and
Yeah.
B, they compared it to a group that was essentially doing nothing. So if you would have to have a study where a group of postmenopausal women, because that was what they were looking at, was lifting super, super heavy at like 85% of their 1 rep max. Then we would need the control group to be lifting at like 70% of their 1 rep max. So that doesn't mean it's easy. That means that then they're going to be doing like barbell back squats, deadlifts, and shoulder press to like muscle fatigue, but they're
Yeah.
just going to do sets of 10 to 12 instead of sets of 3 to 5.
Right.
And so both those things are going to feel very hard. effort doesn't equal intensity. Intensity means how close you're lifting to your 1 rep max. But effort is just like how hard it is. If you're lifting, if you're back squatting 200 pounds, like we were just talking about, and you could only do that 3 times, that would be really good. I can't even do that 3 times, but that would be really good. That's close to your 1 rep max. But if you were squatting like 100 pounds and you could do that 15 pounds, 15 times, both those are going to feel super hard.
Yeah.
Because one you had to do 15 times and the only one you did 3 times. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
We would have to compare those 2 groups in a study and then see that, oh, wow, only the heavy lifting group, the group that only did sets of 3 repetitions, that's the only way we could look at that and be like, yes, you have to lift heavy for bone density.
Yeah.
In fact, we have literature showing and larger systematic reviews and meta-analyses showing that actually like lighter weights, like lifting even as low as like 50%, 40% of your 1 rep max is still having positive effects on bone density. The important thing is that you're doing progressive overload. So this just means once it starts to feel easy, that you bump up in weight. So if I like working out, like I said, at sets of 10 to 15 reps, that feels better on my knees and my low back. So once the weight I'm using at 10 to 15 reps starts to feel easy, I just need to go up a little bit. It's not that I have to be lifting like max I can possibly lift for your bones. We see really, really promising studies showing that you actually can improve bone density working in that like 60% of your 1 rep max. It doesn't have to be way up to like 85, 90%. And that is so encouraging for people. Like it literally, when I have told people that, it like light bulbs went off. They're like, oh my God, maybe I
Yeah.
will go work out. Maybe I will go resistance train. And I'm more than happy to link some of this research in the show notes of this podcast because I want people to see, like, I'm not just making this up. We actually
Yeah.
have literature showing that. What we also have is a Lift More trial that does not prove that only lifting heavy works. It just proves that it works better than essentially doing nothing, which is important, right? That's a randomized
Yeah.
control trial. We just need more, like, we would have to have
We
different
need a true
data
comparison.
showing.
Yeah. Because it's not.
Exactly.
Yeah. Because it's not a
Exactly.
true comparison. So you can't say, no, that's the only way that you
Yep.
can actually get bone density up. And
Yep.
honestly, it kind of makes sense, if you're able to build muscle, both ways, even though bone density takes a lot longer, like you said,
Yep.
it would make sense if you can build muscle both ways that it also would affect your bone density.
Exactly. And there's more to bone density. Like, so we see that also the presence of muscle mass itself is protective to your bones. They
Yeah.
have this muscle bone crosstalk.
Oh,
So,
yeah.
like from a metabolic standpoint, if you have more muscle mass, it's healthier for your bones.
Yep.
So even if you just look at that factor alone, you could say, oh, hey, well, if I'm lifting weights and I know that almost anything works to build muscle mass,
Mhm.
we just need to be showing up and challenging ourselves. If the last few reps feel hard, boom, I'm good. Well, that muscle mass is going to be protective to your bone.
Yeah.
And then the other thing is it's more than just weight training. There's genetics, there's absolutely nutrition. A lot of what you do in your 20s and 30s really sets you up for your bone health later in life. Now, that's not to discourage people that are out of their 20s and 30s, but this is to encourage people who are in their 20s and 30s, start lifting weights now. You're going to set your bone health up for the future. If you're underfueled, right? If you are really intensely like restricting calories, that can have a hugely negative effect on bone density. So there's a lot of things, athletic amenorrhea. So when women lose their cycle, we know that negatively affects bone density if they are, under fueling and over exercising. So it's not one factor. And I think that's important to note is lifting weights doesn't need to be the only thing you look at. It's always
Right.
holistic, right? We got to look at nutrition. We got to look at maybe you need to have a conversation with your doctor about different medications if you already have osteoporosis. Lifting weights might need to be combined with medication. There's a lot of things at play.
Yeah. Yep. No, I mean, it is important because, like, you could be doing all this, but if you have, like, a critically low vitamin D level, it's like, well,
Absolutely.
there's
Yep.
there's a lot.
Yep.
The body is a whole, and so, yeah,
Yep.
it's definitely one part of the puzzle.
Absolutely.
So, perimenopause then, I mean, you kind of talked about it a little bit, and I think it is really important. People are starting to realize, in their 20s and 30s, this is, like, setting the groundwork. I think for a long time, people kind of were like, this is the future and I don't have to worry about it. And I
Yep.
think our generation, and the younger generation are kind of seeing, what some of our parents and grandparents have kind of gone through. And it's been
Yeah.
a wake up call. And people are actually realizing, wait a minute, I want to change what I'm doing now so that my
Yep.
future looks a little bit different, which I think is a really cool. It's been nice to see that shift that people are
Yeah.
actually prioritizing that. But, what would you say in terms of like when you're in your 20s and 30s, I guess, what people should focus on in terms of bone density and
Yeah. I think not being afraid to strength train. I think when you're younger, oftentimes it's fun to just be like, oh, like yoga, Pilates. I think all movement has value. I would never discourage from someone from Pilates or from yoga or from other forms of moving, whether that be running or whatever. I just really, really think every single human being needs to lift weights at least 2 times a week.
yeah,
So, especially in your 20s and 30s, because like I said, that's kind of the peak of your bone density. And then we see from that point that what you're actually trying to do is minimize bone loss as you go on through life. So I like to think of it as like, hey, let's like build the foundation now, like maximize our strongest bones possible, let's say,
yeah,
in our 20s and 30s, so that then we're starting from a higher set point, essentially, right?
mhm,
We don't want to be, 20s and 30s can also be a lot of times when women are struggling with under eating and body image issues. And that's why I really want to empower women like, hey, like, this doesn't like, don't be afraid to be strong. Don't be afraid to take up space. Don't be
yeah,
afraid to lift weights. And I know I'm talking a lot about women because I work almost exclusively with women, but this message is so true for men too, right?
yeah.
Older men can fall and break their hips the same way
Oh,
older
yeah,
women
no,
can.
100%,
So
yeah,
it definitely needs to be conversation of, hey, let's get everyone strength training and like it can be really, really hard if you were an athlete in high school and then, you move into college and then it starts to be like, oh, well, why do I really need to lift weights? Because like, I don't really play sports anymore. I'll just do yoga, whatever. And that's fine if you love yoga, but can you also strength train, please? That would be my like
yeah,
big, big thing. It's like, hey, but just add in this, please, 2 times a week. Doesn't have to be anything super complicated. That's one of my favorite things to do is tell people, like, with my classes, like, "Just show up, press play, and I'll take it from there," because it's
yeah,
like, it doesn't have to be this overly complicated thing, just you need to show up consistently, load, build some, like, strength, build some muscle mass, it'll set you up for down the road later in life, and then don't stop. Keep
yeah.
doing non-negotiable movement minimum through the lifespan. My parents are really great examples of that. They've been lifting weights. My mom started when she was 30. I can honestly tell you I can probably think on, like, one hand how many times she skipped a full week of lifting, like, she's
That's
just been s
impressive, that's
Oh, yeah.
awesome. Yeah,
She's just like and because she's so not extreme with it, like,
mhm,
she doesn't try to work out 5 days a week. She's like, anywhere between 2 to 4 days. She goes up, she has dumbbells at her home, she challenges herself. She's seriously, like, as strong as me and, like, I mean, older than me, clearly.
yeah,
So it's, like, amazing to see her. She's in her mid-60s, has great bone density. She plays tennis outside, so she's getting good sunlight, movement with friends, and then she strength trains really regularly, and, so yeah, it's just been a great motivator to me to see how well she can move and how well she's functioning in her mid-60s just because she's made that little investment in her health throughout her whole lifespan.
yeah. No, and I think that that's like I know for me, it's kinda similar in terms of seeing my mom. So my mom, it wasn't like always growing up that she would lift weights, but around, I would say towards the end of my high school and early college, I started taking her to the gym with me, and then she found classes that she loved. And it's really cool to see the difference, just in her strength, which is then, you can see that strength that translates to everything else, right? In
Absolutely.
terms of making it easier. Like when we go on hikes, when we are bike riding, when she's chasing her grandkids now, like my kids, all of that that makes, her getting injured way less likely and her being able to actually enjoy life, right?
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
I think it's like an encouraging thing for me to be like, "Oh, look at how that's paid off,"
Yes.
and
Yeah.
you can see such a difference, and it's a wild contrast for me when I see people in the hospital that are her same age, right, which
Mhm.
is 70s,
Yes.
and I can see my mom who's running, chasing around, her grandkids, is very healthy, very active versus, patients that I have that are her age or even younger and,
Yeah.
already have all these debilitating issues, where they can't move, they can't enjoy their life, so it's
Mhm.
it's a
Yeah.
a really a big contrast in terms of how big of a difference this can make. So,
Yeah, absolutely.
I think it's encouraging to see, when people are putting in the work and doing all the exercise and how it can be so impactful and so helpful for their
Yeah.
life. So,
I feel like
something you
oh,
what?
I was gonna say with bone density, I feel like we can't move on until we talk about weighted vests because
Oh, yes, those are
I
such a
feel
trend.
like
I, like, just saw a family and they all had, like, it was probably, like, 2 teenagers, like, a middle schooler, like, adults, like, they were all the whole family had weighted vests and were going out for a walk.
oh,
So, yes,
Wow.
we do. I mean,
Okay.
everybody their dog did not have one. I would say one.
They didn't so, it's interesting. So I'll say, weighted vests, it's not again, I would never discourage any type of movement. All
Mhm.
movement's good. I never wanna fearmonger and say something is bad or
Yeah,
whatever. If you love your weighted vest, please don't stop. But there's a lot of claims about weighted vests being this, like, magic bullet for bone density. That's
mhm,
just absolutely not what we have in the research. So again, this is another case of, like, people citing research studies and maybe not actually reading them.
yeah,
Because I've had so many people be like, "No, the research says that weighted vests are, like, incredible for your bones," and I will go comb the research, and what I have found, and I have yet to see a study that that's shown me otherwise, is, like, wearing a weighted vest is not going to improve your bone density unless you're using it as, like, extra load during strength training. So a lot of the
yeah,
studies that people would, like, cite is someone wearing a weighted vest to do, like, squats and lunges, and then we have this case of the control group that almost every one of these weighted vest studies is comparing it to someone doing nothing,
yeah,
literally nothing.
yeah,
So it's like, well, yeah, of course, wearing a weighted vest is more effective than sitting on your couch. I think we'd all be in agreement about that, right?
yeah,
But it's not, we don't have any research to say that it's some like major, groundbreaking thing for bone density. The reality is we have like much higher evidence showing that strength training is more effective for bone density. So I try to tell people like, hey, if you love walking and then you throw on this weighted vest because you feel like you have to, now walking is not fun and your low back is hurting and your knees are hurting. And you went instead of going on a 30-minute walk, now you're going on a 10-minute walk. I would say that's hindering you more than helping you.
right.
Like, we don't wanna be adding, like, joint pain. We don't want to like, honestly, like, I study a lot about breathing, and we don't know, like, is that restricting your rib cage mobility and breath work? Now are you using way more of your neck, and then you're gonna have a sore neck? Like, there's
Yeah,
just so many, like with everything, there's a trade-off, right? So if someone's like, "Hey, I am training because I'm gonna go hike in Patagonia with my family, and I have to carry a big backpack." Hey, you should probably a weighted vest training might be amazing for you because
yeah,
specificity of training. Sure, you might need to actually like condition your body for that. But if that's not your goal, I would so much rather someone spend like 30 minutes strength training and then
yeah,
just go on a walk and enjoy it because we have so much more robust research showing that strength training can move the needle for bone density. We really don't have that with weighted vests.
yeah,
Like it's just, yeah, it's not there. A lot of the studies that showed weighted vests being effective in the study, they were also doing a strength training program. So
yeah,
again, it's like, well, we don't have any studies showing somebody like lifting weights and then wearing weighted vests on their walks and then comparing it with lifting weights and just walking without a weighted vest.
yeah,
Like that would be a hard study to design, but that's kind of the only way to know like, wait, is the weighted vest actually adding some
yeah. Is
additional
it helping at
benefit?
all? Yeah,
As of right now, the studies are looking very not promising in that regard. So,
yeah,
if someone's like, "Oh my gosh, like I didn't know I could skip the weighted vest and my bones will still be okay," I give you full permission. You can absolutely just enjoy your walks and then just make sure to strength train.
yeah, yeah. I love that, and I do think it's like important too, like for people to step back because, like you said, sometimes people will be like, "Well, I have to do this because it's supposed to help," but then they only walk for 10 minutes instead of like triple the
Yeah.
time, and it's like, well, that's gonna do the opposite.
Yeah, actually, one of the studies I looked at was showing that they were measuring, I want to see it say it was effect on VO2 max, don't quote me, but it was a cardiac measure. So maybe it was their heart rate max or what zone they were in or something. But what they looked at is someone wearing a weighted vest, and then they had someone just take off the weighted vest and walk faster, and it was like the same. So, if you think about it,
Yeah,
if the weighted vest is slowing you down, like to the point that now, like you're walking so slow, you're probably not going to get as like it's going to be the same as if you take off the weighted vest and walk like double the speed, right?
yeah,
So it's kind of the same way with lifting weights, right? If you're using a lighter weight and you can do more repetitions, it's kind of the same as using a heavier weight and doing less repetitions, relatively speaking.
yeah,
So again, I could love to just go back to the fact that like, I like talking about this nuance because I like this stuff and it's fun, but for the average person, really doesn't matter. Like
yeah,
show up, be consistent with movement that you love. Don't force yourself. Like if you hate walking with your weighted vest, please don't force yourself to do it. Like you
yeah.
don't have to.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and also, like, you don't wanna get injured too, right? Like,
Absolutely.
that's
Yeah.
something else
Yeah.
that's, like, important, so it's like, I feel like some people are, like, trying to push through that knee pain, with their
Yeah.
weighted vest, and it's like, you don't have to do
Yes,
that.
absolutely. Great point, yeah.
So, warm-ups, I feel like everybody talks about warm-ups, it used to be like, you have to do just static stretching. Then it was dynamic stretching. Then it was like you have to warm up before exercising. Now, no, you don't warm up before exercising. It has to be afterwards. Then it's back to so what do you think about like warm ups and like long warm ups, short warm ups? Are they needed? You know?
Yeah. And so I will say that like the population that I work with, like I said, regular people, right? I'm not working with like high level athletes. Like if someone was trying to go maybe, I'm talking about like an NFL player who's about to go have to sprint from like a dead still position to like a max sprint, they probably want to do some degree of a warm up. However, my population working with regular people, what we see is that if you're lifting weights, you really don't need to spend all this time on a warm up. Like, sure, you could maybe do like 3 to 5 minutes on a bike for some blood flow. But I'm going to be so honest with you. For my workouts, I really don't warm up at all. I have people breathe to help better position their rib cage and their pelvis at the beginning of class, be a little bit more present, get their nervous system to calm down a little bit. And then I go right into the first working set because it saves so much time. Like if you're doing a 30-minute workout, you are doing yourself a disservice by warming up and cooling down for 5 minutes on either end. Because now your workout's only 20 minutes because you just warmed up and cooled down for 10 minutes, right? But the other thing is, if you're not trying to lift like close to your 1 rep max, this is another reason why I like using more moderate weights with sets of 10 to 15 repetitions. Those first few repetitions in the set are counting as your warm up.
Yeah.
So if you were going to go and you were like, okay, today I just really want to know what my 1 rep max for my deadlift is. I would be like, Anna Marie, you have to warm up. You can't just walk up to the bar and try to pull 300 pounds off the floor. Let's start out and have you deadlift, start at maybe 85 pounds and then, 135. And then like slowly you go up and then you go, all right, let's try it for my max effort. See if I can lift this 300-pound barbell. But if you're like, oh no, I'm just doing a set of 15, then and you're using a much lighter weight because you're trying to challenge yourself in 15 reps, you don't need to do all these warm-up sets. You can just get started. And I've read literature, like newer research showing that it's kind of like, hey, actually, like, especially with strength training, like for the average person just going to the gym, there's not really a lot of benefit to warming up and cooling down. If you like it, makes you feel better, you can. If you like stretching a little bit before or after, you can. For me, I'm such in a time crunch with my life. I want my 30 minutes of strength training. I want 27 of them to be strength training, right?
Yeah.
And so no, I really don't do much of any warm up or cool down. And I feel great.
Yeah.
I think like lifting weights like that has been really effective for me. And I think the research supports it. It's like, hey, it's really not a huge deal for the average person.
Yeah. What do you think about stretching? I mean, my husband always makes fun of me because I can't like touch my toes right now. So is that a problem? Is that fine? Do I need to stretch more? Or is like, what do you think in terms
Yeah.
of
So I'm actually not a huge fan of stretching. Nothing that again, I would say it's more from a time management standpoint than anything else. What I tell people is if you're strength training through full ranges of motion, you're loading your muscle through full ranges. You're stretching the muscle as you're loading it. So you're kind
yeah.
of getting a 2-for-1. So for example, like if you are, let's say you're doing a squat, okay? You're squatting down. You're getting mobility through your knees, mobility through your hips, you're stretching through like the quads. Like
Mhm.
that is the mobility and flexibility that you need in life. The other thing is I think people confuse what like normal ranges of flexibility are. And a lot of people, when they're stretching, their goal is actually what we would consider more of hypermobility and excessive flexibility. And what I found from working in the clinic is a lot of times people with pain, they're actually typically excessively flexible. Of course, someone that's not super flexible can still have pain. I just mean that on that spectrum, it's going to be really, really hard for someone who's like, man, like I can just palm the ground, got super like mobile hamstrings, my hips are super mobile. They've got like tons of motion. That means there's a lot for their body and their nervous system to now control. And they need to be strong in all of those ranges so they don't get injured. Whereas the average person who has, more normal range of flexibility, oftentimes it's actually easier for them to like not get injured, not have as much pain. When it comes to like something like the hamstrings, people are always like, oh my gosh, I just need to stretch my hamstrings. They're so tight. If you were to lie on your back and like lift your leg up, if you can go to about 90 degrees of hip flexion, so your body and then your hip is bending about 90 degrees, that is normal hamstring flexibility. Someone that can like kiss their kneecap, like that's excessive. And what we want is strong reactive hamstrings that anchor our pelvis and that like work for us when we're running, when we're lifting. And so a lot of times when we have overly lengthened muscles, we're kind of trading off something else, right? Like at that point, I oftentimes see people that clench their pelvic floor. They tighten in other areas because their nervous system feels unsafe from all this laxity in their hamstrings. So they start to create stability elsewhere and, they start gripping their glutes or clenching their pelvic floor. So excessive flexibility is really not the goal and can actually create a lot of problems. And so I really, really encourage people, like, if you do want to stretch, stretch in normal ranges. Don't shoot for extreme. Now, a reminder, we're talking about the average person. If someone's like,
Right.
oh, well, I'm a dancer and I need to be able to do the splits, that's a different conversation. That's performance, right?
Yeah.
That's like, okay, you need to do the splits because that's what you need to perform as a ballerina. The same way I wouldn't go tell somebody who's not a professional baseball player, oh, the best thing for you is to go throw hundreds of pitches with your shoulder every day. No person is going to tell you that's the best thing for your rotator cuff, but
Right.
they need to do that for performance. We're not talking about performance. For the
Yeah.
average person, a little bit of stretching is fine. I personally don't stretch. I find that strength training through full ranges of motion gives me all the mobility I need. I also find that I feel less tight when I'm strong through full ranges because if you have excessive flexibility, but you're not strong in those ranges, your body will also sometimes sense that as a threat and create tension to kind of prevent you from getting injured, right? So if it doesn't
Yeah.
feel safe in you moving into a range, it'll create tension. A
Mhm.
lot of people that I have found that feel tightness in their hamstrings are typically the people that have excessive hamstring flexibility, that are people that like can do the splits. So when I actually tell them to back off stretching, we start to load their hamstrings, we keep them out of those excessive ranges. They're like, "Oh my gosh, I don't feel tight anymore."
Yeah.
So again, stretching's not bad, no movement's bad. But if someone's constantly feeling tight, a lot of times what I find is like, "Hey, you actually need to like work at getting stronger through those ranges, not just continuing that stretching cycle." Because stretching is almost like scratching an itch. It's like the more you scratch it, the more you kind of feel like you need to scratch it. So the
Yeah.
more you stretch your hamstrings, you probably feel tight and need to keep stretching them all the time.
Yeah.
But if you load them, take a different approach and kind of cool off the stretching, a lot of times that tightness will go away.
I love that. That's actually, like, very helpful, and I also think it's helpful in terms of, like, how much time people have to work out, If you're, like, trying to work in this, like, intense stretching effort, like, you're doing
Yes.
this crazy stretch first and your warm up and your cool down and all of this, it's like, well, then you're not actually getting the workout in, or it has to be an hour, and then
Yeah.
when are you actually having the time to do all of this? So, yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's awesome. We talked about it a little bit, but, what do you think about compound lifts versus just isolated lifts? Like, which is better? Is
Yes.
there one that's better?
Yeah. So I really love both. And so I was just talking about hypermobility. Hypermobility.
Mm,
So this just means someone with more like lax soft tissues. So their ligaments are more lax. They oftentimes have more excessive range of motion. Maybe a lot of times people with excessive mobility have more joint pain. So what I find with those people is compound lifts. And let's talk like they were to just go to a CrossFit class and they're doing like barbell front squats and shoulder presses. I love those movements. Those aren't bad movements by any means,
yeah.
but there's a lot of moving parts. There's a lot of things to control. And so I kind of find that those people can often have more joint pain. So I like a mixture of compound and isolated. So an isolated movement being like maybe they are holding one dumbbell in their hand and doing an isolated bicep curl, or maybe they're lying on their side and doing like a side lying lateral raise for their shoulder versus like a full shoulder press. Because now they're lying on the ground, their body is supported, but they can, so like overall, it feels safer. They feel very supported, less joint pain, but they can still load their shoulder and work that shoulder to the point where the last few reps feel really hard. And so
Yeah.
that's why I kind of like the mixture of the two. Compound movements are nice because they're more time efficient, meaning like you're hitting more muscle groups with one thing.
Mhm.
But still, when I teach compound movements, I do them very differently. Like I often will have someone, let's say we're doing like a kickstand squat. So it's kind of like a variation of a squat where you're trying to load one leg. That helps you hold less weight because if you're loading both legs at the same time, you have to hold more weight than if you're
Mhm.
just loading one leg. And then I'll oftentimes have them have their opposite hand on the wall for support. Again, this gives the body the sense of safety, stability. They don't feel like they're falling around, less
Yeah.
torque at their knees. now they can really control the movement and focus on loading the target muscle versus like all these moving parts of maybe just like standing in the middle of the room and doing like a kickstand squat. That's a lot more from a nervous system standpoint.
Yeah.
And like your environment really affects how you move. That'd be like saying, hey, like, I used to be able to do like a tripod headstand in yoga. I don't know if I can still do it. I'm not sure. I'll have to try after this. But imagine
Yeah.
doing a tripod headstand on the beach, warm sand. If you fall, what are you worried about? Soft. Now
Yeah.
go do a tripod headstand on the edge of a cliff.
Yeah.
Very different experience,
Yep.
right?
Mhm.
It's the exact same on your body with strength training. You go do like a kickstand squat or a kickstand hinge, and you're standing in the middle of the room and there's a lot of moving parts. Your nervous system's gonna feel very differently than you're up against the wall. You've got a hand on the wall, feel more balanced, more safe. So
Yeah.
those are ways that I moved a little off of the compound and isolated here, but those are ways that you can actually really approach it from a nervous system standpoint of like, how do I make my body feel safer so I can actually just focus on loading the muscles versus and like remove some of the other variables.
Yeah.
So that's like when I am doing a compound move, I try to think like, okay, how can I remove some of the other variables to make it really safe and accessible? And then I love isolated movements. I'm gonna be so honest with you. Like I
Yeah.
think they get a bad rap of like, oh, they're not functional. What's like yeah, they are. Like, when I'm carrying my groceries, that's a straight bicep curl, right? When I'm
Yeah.
carrying my kid, like strength is strength. And
Yep.
so, like, if even if you build strength in an isolated manner, it doesn't mean that it doesn't translate to functional movement, right?
Right.
And I love like sideline hip abduction, like glute leg work down on the ground. Now, it's not the only thing. Of course, there's standing exercises are very, very important. But the mixture of the two helps people be like, wow, I can really load the muscles, get more volume, show up on a more regular basis
Yeah.
because my body feels better than just like only doing like barbell front squats. That's what
Mhm.
I found to be very helpful for people is that mixture of the two.
Yeah. Well, and I also think what you brought up in terms of using it then in like a protected environment, because I also think,
Yes.
doing this in a way where it's like safe for people, because if you get injured, right, then
Yep.
you're not going to be able to consistently do this, right? And then, I mean, pain is another reason where people are like, hey, I can't do this. So
Yes.
I guess, which also brings up another question, like, a lot of people struggle in terms of like they're working out and it's causing pain.
Yeah.
So, what do you do when people are basically complaining, "Hey, no, I can't work out because they're just in too much pain." Like, how do you
Yep.
address that, tweak it?
Yeah. So honestly, one of the first things I like help people understand is, hey, actually, maybe we can use a little bit of lighter weights for a period, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we can drop down and still work you to muscle fatigue.
Mhm.
Maybe we start gearing a little bit towards some more isolated movements just to, like, again, minimize some moving parts. Those are just quick, high level things. I also think it's important for people to realize that exercises are made up. And this might sound silly, but like, think about it. Like, our great grandparents were strong because they were doing like manual labor and like
Yeah.
their life was challenging. They weren't doing like sideline lateral raises and glute bridges. Okay. So,
Yeah.
like, those things that we do to load our muscles are like relatively made up. And the reason why that's helpful for people is because then they realize, like, hey, I was doing like this, kickstand hinge movement for my glutes, and I wasn't feeling it in my glutes. I was just feeling it in my low back, and it was kind of hurting. It's very empowering to be like, well, I'll just do a different glute exercise because exercises are made up. Say that in my classes a lot because I really like to remind people, like, I'm the guide, you're the boss. If there is a different exercise that I've taught in classes before, or oftentimes I'll even show other options that people can use that will work better for them in the moment, that's what you should take.
Yeah.
And I like to use myself as an example here. I like deal with a lot of knee pain. I tore my ACL when I was in high school playing sports. I mean, that's always been kind of my Achilles heel is my right knee. And for like literally decades, I used to think that like I am, a failure of a human being if I'm not doing barbell back squats. Like I just
Yeah.
thought like, back squats are like the, most important strength training move in the gym. Like every
Yeah.
single influencer that you swipe through on Instagram is
Yeah,
like,
does
you got
that.
to do
Yeah.
squats. And I would show up and all the time, I never, ever, ever, ever felt like my glutes or my quads were the thing that were actually like getting to muscle fatigue. It was
Mhm.
just like my knee and my low back would kill me. And I tried and I tried and I tried. And it finally, like, I had to come to terms with myself of like, who are you trying to prove? Like, what are you trying to prove?
Yeah.
Like, if this movement isn't working for you, it's not working for you.
Yeah.
And so other variations, like maybe a front squat, or maybe a dumbbell goblet squat, or maybe the kickstand squat with my hand on the wall, maybe a reverse lunge, maybe a rear foot elevated split squat. There's like 1,000 exercises I could program for somebody or myself to actually just crush my glutes and have significantly less knee pain and low back pain. Then that's what you should do. Because if the goal is getting stronger and feeling better, then don't force a movement on you that's not serving you, right?
Yeah. Which
And
I think is like so important because I mean, I've had to retrain myself
yeah,
because I feel like growing up, you always go to these workout classes and they're like, "Oh, wait, you can modify, modify, modify." To me in my brain, modify was like, "Oh, I'm weak."
yes, yeah, yeah,
Like,
yeah,
no, I can't do that. Even if
yep,
this is hurting me, and I could
yeah.
actually be injuring myself. No, modifying means that I'm weak. And that is not it at all. It's like,
I have a
no.
member that made up a phrase that she calls it customize
Yeah,
instead of
exactly.
modify, because
Yes.
she was like, modify has this like negative connotation that like, oh, I couldn't do this because I'm weak, so I have to take this like sad option.
Yeah.
And so she's like, I customized it for me. And I'm like, yeah. Because like think about it. Remember we said weight training is like physics on the body.
Mhm.
We are all made up of pulleys and levers, and our pulleys and levers are different size. We have different
Yep.
body proportions.
Yep.
There's a lot of different factors at play here. We have different
Mhm.
injury histories. We have someone's femurs might be really long, other people's like tibia or torso might be long. Like there's a lot of different factors at play.
Yeah, different stages of life, right? You're pregnant, you have
Absolutely.
more laxity, and then like you're
Yes.
not, just so much. Yeah.
Yeah, tons and tons of factors. And I think this was a conversation I had recently with a member that was like a really, really great light bulb moment and shift in her mindset. And she was just saying, like, gosh, I just feel like when I'm doing a move and I'm having pain, she struggles with lower back pain. She was like, when I'm having pain, I think that like if I just push through and I get stronger, then that pain will go away. And I had to tell her, I was like, think about this. If you're doing a movement and it's causing pain, why would that painful movement all of a sudden then cause you to be out of pain? That's
Right.
not how it works.
Yeah.
If you're just like picking the scab by continuing to do a painful movement over and over again, it's not getting you out of pain. It's putting you back in that pain cycle.
Yeah.
So, like, you actually need to look at that and be like, she was specifically talking about a kickstand hinge, a hinging movement for her. And there's a lot of things that can go into a hinge. Like, she might need more work on opening her posterior pelvic floor or lengthening through the posterior pelvic outlet. Or like there's a lot of mechanics. Maybe she needs to work on isolating her hip from her low back movement. Sure, we can work on all these form things. That's great. Of course, we will do that. But for right now, if she's doing a kickstand hinge and she doesn't feel any of her booty, all she feels is just like debilitating low back pain.
Yeah.
I was like, or not even debilitating. All she feels is just low back pain. I'm like, you're not going to get the outcome you want, which is
Yeah.
stronger glutes, if all you're feeling is low back pain. The outcome you'll get is more low back pain.
Yeah.
So you have to choose a movement where you're like, okay, no, no, no. I feel this in my glutes. This is effective for me.
Yeah.
That's the move you need to do. You can't just, keep expecting, be like, I'll just push through this pain and eventually I'll get stronger and I'll get
Yeah.
better. It doesn't work like that, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of people like think that exercise inherently needs to be painful to be effective. And that's also not true at all.
Mhm.
Like tiring out a muscle and that muscle fatigue, that's very different than experiencing like joint pain, like low back pain, knee pain. And that's an important, differentiation.
Yeah. No, it really is. And I mean, again, that's something I had to retrain myself with because I feel like I have to like kill myself. This
Yeah.
has to, I need to not be able to walk tomorrow or
Yeah.
lift something. And then, I can't work out for another couple of days
Yep.
because I have died.
Yes. Yep.
And then my other issue was, then injuring myself when it's like,
Yep.
no, I should have just listened to my body and done this in a healthy way. And I love that it's not modifying, customizing. I'm going to remember
Yes.
that
I
one.
know. It's
So,
so good.
yeah.
Gotta give her mad props there.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. Well, this has been so great. I love talking through all this stuff. I know I've learned tons, and I'm sure everybody listening also has learned, hopefully. So, and hopefully we can have another session. And I love
I love that.
all the education. So this has been great.
Thank you so much for having me. This was awesome. And of course, feel free to put my contact info in the show notes if people have questions or want to reach out. I'm always happy to answer. I love these conversations. It's so fun for me. So thank you
Yeah.
so much.
Yeah. And anybody looking for workout routine, look up Loa movement. It's amazing. 10 out of 10 recommend. So
Oh, thank you.
yeah. And
Yes,
we'll
I'd
put
love
it,
to have you.
yeah. And we'll put it in the show notes too. So,
Awesome.
all right. Everyone have a good one.
Thanks.
Thank you for joining us for the Duration Wellness Show. We hope you feel equipped to apply today's science-backed insights to your daily life. To find show notes, past episodes, and all the resources we mentioned, visit us at durationwellness.com. As always, this podcast is for informational and educational purposes only and does not constitute medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. The views and opinions expressed by guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the host. We'll see you next time, and as always, we're here with you for the duration.